once in those jurisdictions, they've got people who are registering to vote in those particular elections, again, typically local elections as non-citizens. It raises all kinds of questions. Once they have registered, what happens to their registration? Is there a mechanism in those jurisdictions whereby those who are allowed to vote in whatever local election are prevented somehow from using the same voter registration file to also cast votes in a federal election? The states that allow this, that are doing that, are conspicuously among the states not participating in memoranda of understanding-based agreements with authorities in the Department of Homeland Security and other federal agencies involved in this, meaning they're not sharing their information, not opening their files to allow for federal authorities to examine them and make sure that those people are being kept separate from the list of voters allowed to cast votes in federal elections. So the Save America Act would repair our election security by requiring proof of citizenship to register and a photo ID to vote. This is an important part of ensuring our longstanding promise of one citizen, one vote. When you allow non-citizens to vote, that offsets that equation. It dilutes, it diminishes the votes cast by American citizens lawfully. Our Democrat colleagues have been insisting that this is not necessary. They insist it's not necessary because, after all, it's already illegal for a non-citizen to vote in a federal election. It's a little bit like saying it's unnecessary to require liquor stores to check IDs to make sure that they don't sell liquor to children because, after all, it's already illegal. There are lots of circumstances where it makes sense to do that sort of thing, trust but verify, because if you don't do that, you're not even going to know who might be violating it. This is one of those areas. Now, today, one of our colleagues from Oregon, Senator Jeff Merkley, said that the Save America Act, and this is a direct quote, stabs a knife through the beating heart of our democracy. Really? Well, that's news to me. First of all, it's news to me that given that a policy choice that enjoys the support of roughly 80% of the American people, putting that in law, I don't understand how that would stab democracy in the heart, especially given that this is itself strengthening and securing one of the most important incidents of citizenship, which is the vote. Republicans overwhelmingly support this. 95% of Republicans, roughly 83% of Americans generally, and 71% of Democrats. It's only here in Washington, D.C., within the halls of the United States Capitol, that this is controversial, even among Democrats. Over 170 countries across the world have some form of voter ID requirement. It's actually much easier to identify the very small handful of nations with democratic elections that do not have voter ID requirements. So I would ask the question, why should we allow the United States of America to have election security laws and procedures inferior to those in, I don't know, Moldova or Bangladesh, for example? The Save America Act embodies the mantra often used in this town and elsewhere that we want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. You have to have both of those. If you neglect either one, you're going to create problems. If you prefer the former, well, shunning the latter, then you will in fact succeed in making it easy to vote. But that sort of betrays and diminishes the whole point of having free and fair elections, and it makes them impossible. So, look, I think that there's only one legitimate reason to oppose this. I have yet to hear a legitimate argument against the bill, which begs the question, do they really just want to make it easy to vote so badly that they're willing or even enthusiastic to just make it easier to cheat? So far, the congressional Democrats have, by and large, focused on arguments that are a combination of being ill-founded, relying on blatant mischaracterizations of the statutory text itself, including and especially the text beginning on page 12, line 22, and following on to the following page, easing the documentary requirements for proof of citizenship, making it so easy. It's much easier than filling out your I-9 form when you start a new job with a new employer, where you're required to prove your citizenship if in fact you're an American. If you're not an American citizen, you're going to have to produce a visa showing that you are eligible to work. But we make it easier than that. We make it so easy, in fact, that even if all of your citizenship documentation papers have disappeared because your house burned down, your dog ate them, your crazy Aunt Madge came and stole them and took them to the dump for some inexplicable reason, or maybe you never had them, you can still go to a state election official, swear out an affidavit just describing the basic elements, the basic factual assertions behind your claim to citizenship, whether it's when and where you were born and to whom. If you are a natural-born citizen, entitled to citizenship by virtue of the circumstances at your birth, or if you're a naturalized citizen, where, when, and how you became a naturalized citizen, and the date, exact or approximate, of your naturalization. This makes it incredibly easy and puts the onus back on the state if you're one of those people who either lacks some documentation or maybe even lacks all of it. They ignore that. And then a lot of the rest of their documents boil down to a combination of things. It's racist and it's sexist. Does any of that sound familiar? You've heard that before? Very often when it does come up, it comes up in a context like this one, where both of those arguments are red herrings. Both of those arguments are rooted in assumptions that are themselves racist and misogynistic, and they're cover for something else. Why are they arguing that when it so obviously does not apply? It's impossible to reconcile with the text of the bill itself to make that accusation. What are they covering for? What's missing when that's the argument that they continue to fall back to like a dog to its vomit? I can't think of anything more racist or misogynistic than those arguments that are being raised, at least not within this realm. You can think of things, but it's hard to come up with anything more racist or misogynistic than the assumptions underlying those arguments. So look, showing ID and proof of citizenship is something that Americans have to do every single day to get a job, to start a job, to board a plane, to open a bank account, to enroll in school, to shovel snow in New York City, to get veterans benefits, to get Social Security benefits, to get a hunting license or a fishing license, or pick up a prescription, or to get into the Democratic National Convention, where you have to prove identity with a voter ID, and you have to, in order to be able to participate in the proceedings, show that you're entitled to be there and that you're a delegate. Yes, they do that. So if they want to call this Jim Crow 2.0, then so too is the Democratic Party. And of course, it is not, nor is this. These are red herring arguments. I'm pleased to be here with several of my colleagues. We'll hear from each of them now, starting with my friend and colleague from Florida, Senator Rick Scott.
First off, I want to thank Senator Lee for his tireless effort trying to get this done. So I've been up here 7 years. This is probably the most bipartisan thing I've ever seen. If you go around the country, I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat or Independent, you want this. There's just a video that came out this morning of DC voters. They want it. So people want this. The only place where they don't want this is in the Senate, and the Democrats in the Senate and the House. That's the only group that doesn't want it. So why don't they want it? There's only one answer. They want fraud. They want to allow illegal aliens to vote. That's the only answer. So think about what you show more than anything else. It's not your credit card for most people. It's your driver's license. You show ID for everything. As Senator Lee said, you show it to get hopefully not get a ticket. But if you go to the grocery store, you often have to show it. If they're checking your credit card. If you go to a doctor's office, you board a plane. Whatever you do, you're going to have to do this. Buy a lottery ticket in my state. And so whatever you have to show this. So it's not like it's in the world to show it. So the Democrats say, oh, first off, it's Jim Crow 2.0. Well, let's remember they were the party that was Jim Crow, but this is not. There's nothing racist about this. So everybody I know has ID. And think about it, they say married women it's going to be disenfranchised married women. Now, I'm married to a married woman. I have 2 daughters that are married, and I think they can figure out how to get whatever ID they want, how to vote, all those things. They don't need anybody telling them what to do. They can figure this out. So any Democrat that says that women can't figure this out, they're stupid. So we're on this bill. I think we've got to keep working on this bill. The way I look at it is there's 3 ways to get this passed. The best way is for the Democrats to come to their senses. Come to their senses and say, you're right, we ought to get this done. That's number one. Number 2 is we can find a must-pass bill to try to add it to that. And number 3, we can say, is there a way to do it through the talking filibuster, or is there another way like that? But this is important. This is important to secure elections. Trump secured our border. He needs us to secure elections. The American public wants us to secure elections. I don't think there's anything I've done up here, maybe as governor, there's something like daylight savings time, but up here that is more popular than getting this bill passed. So I hope we'll be able to get this done. So now let me turn it over to my colleague from Oklahoma, James Langford.
Mr. Scott, thanks. This is not challenging because it's every single time we voted, every single election in Oklahoma. It's funny to me the number of people that come and say, how would this ever work? And I just smile and go, well, we figured it out. Everybody else knows how to be able to do this. In every election in Oklahoma, every single person who votes has to show ID. And I mean every single person who votes. In person or by mail. Our mail-in votes in Oklahoma are done when they actually show up at a spot to be able to mail in and get a notary to be able to look at their ID, to be able to take the envelope that's about to be matched, to match the name that's on the envelope and the name of the ID, and then it actually is notarized and then goes in the mail. Every person who votes in Oklahoma, whether by mail or in person, has to show ID. And you know what? We have a lot of people that show up to vote. This is not challenging here. And it's the most simple, basic thing that we actually deal with when we talk about the Save America Act. This basic principle that citizens vote and you have to show ID. You can't just walk up and say, my name is John Smith and I should be on that list somewhere, check off that's me. You have to actually verify that that's actually you at that point. So we know one vote for one person, and that's all they get. It's also interesting to me when I think about this most basic element, that is you have to be a citizen to vote. And I have some of my colleagues that will go back to the 1965 Voting Rights Act. I go, do you realize the 1965 Voting Rights Act begins with the phrase, all citizens? That's how it starts. All citizens. It was the most basic principle of that bill, began with the simple statement of all citizens. This is a simple trust and verify piece that we're trying to be able to put into place. To say, we've already agreed that this should only be for citizens. We've already agreed that there should be consequences if you're not a citizen, but we're just not verifying it and checking it. Again, I have folks that have caught me and have said, well, this is just a non-issue. Non-citizens just don't vote. In Oklahoma, several years ago, we actually passed a law, a state law in Oklahoma, that was pretty simple and straightforward. The state law was, if someone comes into jury duty and says before a judge, I'm not eligible to serve in jury duty, though I've been called, I'm not eligible to be able to serve because I'm not a citizen. If they say that, then by state law now, we have to check the voter roll to see if they're also registered to vote. If they are, and we have found folks that are, their name is automatically dropped from the voter roll. It's the way that we're doing it in Oklahoma, to be able to find ways to say if there's someone who is not a citizen of the United States and is in violation of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, that we are making sure their name is being purged off the voter roll, so it is only citizens of the United States that are actually voting in our elections. You know what? We still have elections. We still vote. Somehow we as Oklahomans have figured it out. So we say to the rest of the country, we do ID all the time. We check citizenship all the time on it. This is a common sense provision that we want to be able to bring to the nation that is already statutory. Let's actually just have implementing legislation with it. So I want to be able to recognize my colleague from Ohio, John, be able to come on up. Come on, John.
Thank you, James. I'm John Husted, Senator from Ohio. But for the purposes of this discussion, I was the Secretary of State of Ohio from 2011 to 2019. I was Ohio's chief elections official. I'm one of the few people in Congress that's actually ever been in charge of an election. And we made it easy to vote and hard to cheat in Ohio. And many of my fellow colleagues from around the country did that. And one of the ways that they did that was photo ID. And another way they did that was properly maintaining voter rolls. Photo ID should be the national standard. Photo ID is popular among the American people. It improves the integrity of an election. It also improves the administration of an election. I want you to understand from a practical point of view how much easier it makes it on elections officials to have a photo ID law. Because simply all you need to do on election day is when you go up to the poll worker, who may be one of your elderly neighbors, maybe a young person, all they need to do is simply take your photo ID, run the magnetic strip through the reader, and boom, there you are. There's your picture, there's your information. It tells them what ballot to give you. It is also an improvement on election administration. And that's another reason that having photo ID and the system that we have in Ohio and many other states have is important. The Save America Act is a very important piece of legislation, but it has several parts to it. And I've heard the Democrats object to it, but I've also read quotes recently from several, and I want to make sure that I get this right, that in looking at the matter of photo ID, Chuck Schumer said, our objection as Democrats is not to photo ID, is not to a photo ID. That's what he said. So I'm going to give him a chance this afternoon to prove that, as I will offer up a live UC that will have photo ID available for to set the national standard of the country that would allow people to vote with a driver's license, with a state ID, with a passport, with a military ID or a tribal ID. These are the simple photo ID methods that are available to every American citizen. In Ohio, for example, if you do not have a state ID, we will give you one for free. And every state in the nation can run an election that way. It will improve integrity. It will improve the administration of elections. And for America, for the American people, it will help us settle this business once and for all about whether or not our elections have integrity. Once we have photo ID, once we have proof of citizenship, American citizens can have more trust in their elections, and that they can know that it is indeed a nation where it is easy to vote and hard to cheat. Senator Britt?
Sir. Well, these gentlemen have covered much of what we need to talk about today, but I want to start by thanking Senator Lee. So Senator Lee got in there on this issue, and he has made sure that people paid attention. This isn't a Republican issue. This is an American issue. When you look at the polling, it is wildly popular amongst Republicans, amongst independents, and amongst Democrats. When you see something like that, I think it's incumbent upon us to actually do something on something like that. And that's exactly what Senator Lee has done with the Save America Act. And today we talk about the heart of that. I appreciate Senator Husted and his work as Secretary of State. He knows this issue front and back. He talked about it, but we want to make sure that Americans have faith in their elections. We want to make sure that they are free, fair, and secure. If Americans don't have faith, it undermines the very pillars that hold up our democracy. And we know the best way to do that is to require ID. We do it in the great state of Alabama. And we also say, hey, if for some reason you can't come to us, we'll come to you. We're going to make sure that you have one, because we also understand that it is fundamental to actually achieving the American dream. So for many of my colleagues, they have said that this is unattainable for certain segments of the population, certain people. I find that wildly offensive. And I am here today to say that if that is your argument, let's drill down on that. Because you can't rent a home, you can't go to work, you can't shovel snow in New York City without an ID, and you can't get into John Ossoff's campaign event. So I'm pretty sure as we look to try to achieve the American dream, whether that's getting insurance, whether that's getting a car, whether that's signing your kid up for school, you need an ID. So if my colleagues continue to say that there are certain segments of the population that can't get one. Why don't we deal with that? Because I want every American, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their background, regardless of their state, to be able to achieve the American dream, and without simple identification, they can't do that. But let's secure our elections. Let's do it now. When you go pick up your ballot, it'll still be there if you have to show your ID before you get it. And I am excited to hear so many of my Democratic colleagues come to the table and say they're for this too. I look forward to watching them follow through with that on the Senate floor. This is the same party that you remember made us have vaccine passports to go out to eat during COVID, and has done so much more infringing on our individual rights. I certainly look forward to them helping protect one of the most important ones, and that's the right to vote. So thank you for your leadership on this, Senator Lee. I say let's get this done. We're certainly not going to quit until we do.
Thanks so much. Thanks for being here. All right, I think we've got 10 to 15 minutes. Let's get through questions.
Certainly. There probably will be a Democrat coming to the floor from a bright blue state to object to John Husted's UC request. Are you going to seek a roll call vote on this photo ID provision as an amendment to the bill to put every Democrat on record, or more specifically, this weekend votes on Saturday and Sunday? What amendments do you think you'll be voting on?
Well, my personal overall emphasis is going to continue to be on the bill in particular, but I intend to be there when Senator Husted offers up his amendment, and be there to speak in support of it in the event that I've got something there to offer, because I think that too is very much worth supporting. As far as what else might happen, I'm not sure, and I'll leave others to speak to that. If your question is whether Senator Husted is seeking also a roll call vote on it, I don't know, and I want to speak for him, but do you want to weigh in on that?
We'll see what happens on the floor.
Given how many Senate Democrats yesterday indicated openness to the voter ID provisions, it'll be interesting to see who, if anyone, steps up to object to that.
Senator, you said, or I think wrote on Twitter a few days ago, that Republicans will lose power likely for a long time if Save America does not pass. Can you expand on that? How do you expect that to work?
Look, obviously nobody can know the outcome of an election. A lot of ink has been spilled in explaining how very often in this kind of framework, the presidential administration comes in and you've got majorities in both houses of Congress aligned with the president's party. And there are sometimes difficulties holding on to both houses, in some cases either chamber, following that alignment. And so a lot of people point that out. When you add to that the amount of support for this legislation within our base, but also within the base of the other party, if we don't get it done, or at least do everything that we possibly can to try to get it passed, I think there is a very significant risk that our own base doesn't show up for us in November. We worry about that. We also worry about the integrity and the security of our elections. Nobody knows exactly how things will pan out, in part because we don't yet know the extent of the problem. What we do know is that in the states that have started reviewing the voter registration files in order to weed out those who might have registered, perhaps inadvertently, perhaps intentionally, already there have been thousands of voter registration files identified just in the handful of states that have been doing their own review. The states that have not been doing their own review would yield really significant results if those reviews began. But a lot of those same states that are run by Democrats are not only not doing their own review, they're refusing even to share their voter registration files with federal officials in an attempt to try to go through it. It begs the question, why? When you add to that this additional dynamic of the handful of states in which some local elections openly allow non-citizens to vote, and the fact that they have also been unwilling to share that, and they've also been unwilling to explain how, whether, to what extent, in what ways, they separated out those voter registration files who are non-citizens, who are allowed to vote there, and how it is that they make sure that they're not voting in federal elections. All those things could contribute, and we have to assume that they might well contribute to Republican losses in November. Yeah.
Senator Lee, there's a provision in the bill that asks states to make photocopiers or imaging equipment available in public buildings. Could you describe the reason for that, and do you want to change at all what they, how they worded that in the House passed bill?
If there's a need, if there's something that could help us get it passed easier, if there's a hurdle that needs to be overcome, we're open to all kinds of suggestions, particularly on that. And changing that is not an essential characteristic of the bill, nor would it, I can't imagine that making some minor tweaks to that, how that works. I don't think it would do anything to make it unpassable in the House. So I'm open to considering whatever.
I mean, they have, that's in the House passed version. Would you want to change it? Is there a different?
We're on the House.
You'd want to change it.
No, we're on the House passed version. I have not looked at that and found that deficient. But what I'm saying is if somebody identifies something that could or should be added to it that would help us get more votes, I'm open.
Do you like that provision yourself? You think it's good?
Well, I think it's one of many provisions in there that is designed to make the impact on the voter and or on the participating jurisdictions easier.
No Democrat I know has complained about it.
Yeah, I haven't.
Senator, given that Schumer says that Democrats aren't necessarily opposed to photo ID, would you be in favor of trimming down the Save America Act to only focus on photo ID? And have you received any indication that the White House would be in favor of that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, because of Senator Husted and his great idea on this, they'll have their chance this afternoon to state their position on that. State their position on whether to support that and what they would do with the rest of it. If your question to me is, would I walk away from the rest of the bill and say, oh, okay, well, we got this, so never mind. No. We're going to continue to push the rest of the legislation. If we can get that passed separately, fantastic. And we'll focus on the rest of the provisions. The two things are necessary for different reasons. And there again, if somebody comes up with a good faith, productive suggestion about how we could make those provisions better, I'm all ears. I'm open to suggestions. But the freestanding independent concerns would remain. It would be fantastic if we get this win. They shouldn't object. They shouldn't allow this to become law, and I think the country would be better off for it, and then we could move on to the other items. But I'm not going to walk away from the rest of it because, remember, the whole reason we're here, what started the original SAVE Act was this realization of a confluence of events and changes in law and the interpretation of law over the last 33 years since NPRA was passed that have resulted in 30 million plus non-citizens in the United States, 10 to 15 million of whom came into this country unlawfully between 2021 and 2025 alone. And then the Supreme Court's ruling in Arizona versus Intertribal Council of Arizona, where they said that if you are dealing with an NPRA-supplied voter registration form available in DMVs of almost every state, even if you know somebody is a non-citizen, you cannot attempt to verify citizenship because it's somehow preempted. That is an independent freestanding problem. There may be multiple ways of addressing that. We've come up with a way that we think is fair. It's easy to comply with, makes it easy to vote and hard to cheat. But no, we're not going to walk away from that.
And then in terms of just the process we're seeing now, we're spending several days with members of both parties talking about this bill. How long would you like this sort of extended debate period to pass? And do you think it's a productive use of the Republican Party's time?
Yes, absolutely, emphatically. There's nothing more pressing. Now, there are only a couple of things that are likely to interrupt it, but they'd interrupt it momentarily. Obviously, we're still very much wanting to get DHS funded. Those discussions are still ongoing. We could toggle back and forth if when a deal is reached on that, and I hope it is. And then Mark Lane Mullen's confirmation vote, we can toggle in and out of that and get that done, but we need to go right back to this. To answer your question as to how long, as long as it takes to get it passed. With legislation that is this popular and people from both parties, among every demographic, among regionally, racially, party affiliation, male, female, we have an obligation to do everything we can to get this passed. In the case of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, not the same bill, different context, I don't mean to overdo the comparison, they stayed on that for 60 days. And near the close of that 60-day process, when people were worn down, the members opposing it, it was a 32-vote cloture deficit that they faced. The members who had been opposing it for that long got worn down, not just physically exhausted, but they also became tired of opposing a bill that was getting more popular. As people saw more about it, and as they saw that the arguments against the bill weren't working and weren't good. And so in order to save face and in order to address some of their concerns, they proposed amendments. Those amendments were adopted. They closed the 32-vote cloture deficit. If they could do that on a bill that's much more complex, groundbreaking, was less popular, between 51 and 54% at the time it was passed by the House in March of 1964, and they were able to close a 32-vote cloture deficit, we can do that with a much simpler bill, a more popular bill that has a mere 10-vote cloture deficit.
Senator, with the more controversial amendments that have been added, I suppose, like the no men and women's sports, do you think that harms the ability to pass the SAVE Act as it was given by the House?
Well, no, I mean, look, that's part of what the amendment process does. The amendment process allows us to consider changes, additions, subtractions, other modifications, and I mean, we'll see. But I think the amendment process itself will be informative of what can pass as an amendment and what could still pass to whatever degree the bill is modified. Yes, sir.
Thanks, sir. Following up on the idea of separately passing a voter ID requirement, let's say you guys stay on this for a while, you've got Democrats coming over to your side on the ID thing, you get through the Mullen confirmation and funding DHS, would you be open to, under cloture, you know, at some future point in time, at a 60-vote threshold, trying to pass the voter ID provision specifically, because you might not be able to get all Democrats to not object, but you might be able to get 7 or 8 who are willing to vote for that.
Right. That's how they finished the job in '64. Enough came over, they were able to achieve.
But leaving the rest of the Save America Act on the table?
Oh, maybe I misunderstood your question. If your question is we're going to leave the rest of it once we get voter ID passed, no. I mean, we got to keep debating until it passes or until it becomes apparent that we've done everything we can and we're nowhere near that point. But I'm told I've got time for one more question. We've got to move on. Let's see. I don't remember who was first. One of you two was first. Let's just hit both of these and then we go.
In terms of Senator Schmidt's substitute amendment that has the restrictions on mail-in voting, some of your Republican colleagues, including John Curtis in Utah, expressed some concerns with what that would mean for how their states carry it out. You also being from Utah, how are you having those conversations with Republicans on how to deal with that?
Well, we're having conversations. It's not yet certain how that vote will turn out and what negotiations might ensue, but yeah, we're having a lot of conversations.
Or what amendments we'll vote on.
Yeah.
Some of your Senate Republican colleagues have raised concerns in recent weeks that what they view, I think, as an online pressure campaign is counterproductive for the conference writ large. Have they raised concerns with you directly, and what is your response to that?
Well, look, it's a popular bill, and popular bills create their own organic support bases. Every time I talk to activist people who support this, I'm like a broken record, telling them cast more flies with honey than with vinegar, and I recommend encouragement and focusing on the positive elements of the bill. They do what they do, it is what it is. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks.